In this very short and what I am sure will become highly controversial video, I will explain to you the most popular license-free radio services. And by that I mean I will explain to you what kind of two-way radios you may legally use with no license, no call signs, and most importantly, without having to pay any fees to any overreaching and out-of-control government agencies just to use the free airwaves. I will briefly explain some of the details of each different type of radio service, as well as some of the pros and cons of using each service or each different type of radio. However, unlike most of those other YouTubers, I will do all of this in a way that even you will be able to understand. I will not try to impress you by getting into all of the technical radio dork details, and even more amazingly, I will do all of this without wasting a moment of your time by desperately begging for you to subscribe to my channel, because I would never do such a thing, because I understand that you think your time is very valuable. The first on the list of no license required radio services is probably the best known and most popular of them all. Of course, made famous by the 1970s Hollywood film Every Which Way But Loose, starring Clint Eastwood and Dustin Hoffman. Of course, I am referring to CB radio, also known as Citizens Band radio. This happens to be a handheld walkie-talkie CB radio, which is actually not very common. Most CB radios are designed to be installed in cars or used in your house while connected to a big antenna on the roof. CB radios are limited to outputting 4 watts, which in the radio world is not very much. However, some of the more fancy and expensive CB radios are able to transmit on what is called sideband, and on those channels up to 12 watts is permitted by our overlords at the FCCs. CB radio has 40 channels, all in the 26 to 27 gigahertz range, which is the lowest frequency range of all of the free radio services. This means that because of those low frequencies, CB radios have the potential to be heard from hundreds or even thousands of miles away in the right conditions. However, in normal conditions, you will usually get only a mile or so of FARS when using a CB radio. The biggest pro in favor of using a CB radio is that everyone knows what a CB radio is, and many people already have a CB radio in their car or truck. Some cons of CB radio are that it is full of a lot of people with southern accents using illegal and high-powered radios to transmit a bunch of garbage. And because of the low frequency that CB radio uses, that I mentioned only a moment ago, that garbage can sometimes travel very far, causing garbagey and very annoying southern accent noise and static from thousands of miles away. Next on the list of license-free radio services and types of radios that anyone can use is MURS, also known as Multi-Use Radio Service, and it is correctly pronounced MURS. MURS radios have only 5 channels, and those channels are in the 151 to 154 gigahertz range. And back in the olden days, back when men were men and women were not men, some of these channels were known as blue dot and green dot channels. MURS and MURS radios are not very popular, and most people have probably never heard of MURS. This means that when you are using a MURS radio, you will hear very little noise or other people talking. MURS radios are limited to outputting only 2 watts And when using a MURS walkie-talkie, the FARs are usually limited to a mile or so at best. However, you are permitted by our overlords at the FCCs to connect your MURS radio to a larger antenna on your roof, which can get you a few more FARs. And according to our overlords at the FCCs, you are also allowed to transmit data over MURS. Data like for a digital security camera or for remotely opening and closing the gate entrance at your castle. However, fancy digital voice modes such as P25 or DMR are not permitted. Some pros of MURS are that because nobody uses it and because the power is very low, the channels are usually very quiet. And because of the low frequencies, MURS tends to do better when transmitting outdoors when compared to other higher frequency, low-powered radios. Some cons of MURS are the low power and nobody uses it. Next on the list of license-free radio services is FRS, also known as the Family Radio Service. These are the kind of radios that you buy at Walmart or the sporting goods store for $20 or sometimes less. And FRS radios are commonly referred to as bubble pack radios because of the type of box that they usually come in when you buy them at the Walmart. FRS radios have 22 channels in the 462 and 467 MHz range, and FRS radios are limited to only 2 watts. Our overlords at the FCCs also require that all FRS radios have non-removable antennas. This means that you cannot connect an FRS radio to a larger antenna on the roof of your house or your car. In the right conditions, you can get a couple of miles of FARs using an FRS radio. However, that would be only in the very best of conditions. Because of the higher frequencies that FRS radios use when compared to the previous radio services I have just spoken of, FRS signals do not go through things like trees or around big hills. This is why FRS is known as a line of sight or LOS radio service. That basically means that if you cannot see it, you probably cannot talk to it using an FRS radio. Some cons against using FRS are the low power limit and not being able to connect to a larger antenna. One of the pros of using FRS radios is that FRS radios are usually very inexpensive and budget-friendly. However, the biggest pro by far is that all 22 FRS channels are shared with GMRS radios, meaning that FRS radios use the exact same channels as GMRS radios, which you do need a license to transmit on. Basically, an FRS radio is a baby version of a GMRS radio with less power and fewer capabilities, but all of the same channels. So what this means to you is that if you are going on an off-road trip or hiking with your friends or doing whatever it is that you do, if you would ever get up off of that couch, if your friends tell you that you must use a GMRS radio and get a GMRS license to talk with everyone, you can just stop at the local Walmart and grab a $20 FRS radio. Because as I just mentioned, the FRS channels are exactly the same as the GMRS channels. That means that channel 17 on this radio or channel 17 on this radio will talk with channel 17 on this much more expensive GMRS radio, which does require a license to transmit on. Probably one of the biggest cons against using FRS would be that because, as I just mentioned, both FRS and GMRS radios use the same channels, and because both FRS and GMRS radios are very popular in most areas of the United States, the channels are very noisy and very crowded. So which license-free radio service is the best? It is my very unhumble opinion that no matter which radio service I say is the best, a bunch of ass clowns will leave comments proclaiming that I am wrong. So to find out which radio service is the best, just look in the comments to see what the ass clowns have proclaimed. Or, and hear me out here, decide for yourself based on the pros and cons of each radio service, and decide for yourself which one you think would be the best to suit your radio needs and your radio desires.